The Gemara in Pesachim, Daf Kuf Yudalad Amud Aleph, deals with Kiddush at the Seder. And one of the first issue is the machlokas between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai about whether the wine, the bracha of Bar Pei Agafen should come first, or the bracha of Kedushas Hayom, Asher Bachar Banu, should come first. And the reason given for the wine coming first is Shehayayin Gorem LeKiddush Sheshet Ha'amer, that the wine causes Kiddush to be said. So how does it that the wine causes Kiddush to be said? So Rashi says, Shem ein lo yayin o pas ein mekadesh, because without wine, there's no Kiddush, or bread which would stand in the place of wine. But it's the wine which causes the Kiddush to be said. And the Rashbam says the same, more or less the same thing. Shem ein lo yayin o pas ein mekadesh. There's no Kiddush without wine or bread. The mekadesh al pas kim mekadesh al yayin ubirchas al pas kodem. In other words, if you don't have wine, you can make Kiddush on bread, in which case the bread has the same status as the wine. So whether Kiddush is said on wine or bread, that bracha of Hagafen or Hamotzi would come first before Asher Bachar Banu. And that's because without wine or bread, there is no Kiddush. It's interesting that in the Shulchan Aruch and Hilchos Shabbos, he deals with the question of what a person does if he doesn't have wine for Kiddush. And Shulchan Aruch says, "B'makom she'en yayin matzah." Yesh Omrim, the first opinion is shemekachim al sheicha v'shar mashkim chutz min hamayim, that you can make Kiddush on any beverage, beer or other beverages, anything but water. You could say Kiddush. V'yesh Omrim, and some say she'en mekachim, and some say no, you have to have only wine. Ulaharash, and according to the Rush, B'layla lo yikadesh ala sheicha el ala pas. The Rush says that at night, it depends. If it's the night, then you can't use beer instead of wine, only bread or wine. Ubaboker yoser tov l'kadesh al shecher. Whereas in the morning, for the kiddush during the day, if you don't have wine, actually it's better to use beer than bread. Sheyivarch olav shahakol kodem birchas hamotzi, and you say shahakol on the beer, and then you say hamotzi on the bread. Shem yivarch ala pas tchila. Ein kanshina, because if you say kiddush on the challah, on the bread, and we know kiddush by day is only the bracha of Bar Pei Agafen, there's no extra bracha of kedushas hayom. At night we have the bracha of Asher Bachar Banu, but during the day, even though there are some introductory psukim to kiddush, there is no other bracha in kiddush. So essentially, the whole kiddush would be hamotzi. Hamotzi would be kiddush. You wouldn't recognize that you're making Kiddush. So Divrei Tamim, that makes sense. Says the Shulchan Aruch that at night you can't use beer, you can only use wine or bread, and during the day you can use beer also. V'chein min Pasha, the Ramah says, K'divrei Rosh. Interesting, in the Birchei Yosef, this commentary on Shulchan Aruch, he raises the question: what does a person do? Mishaya b'midbar below lechem v'yayin. Someone's in the desert, he has no wine or bread. He still has to say Kiddush. In other words, even though he has no wine and no bread, you say the bracha of Kiddush. Maybe not the Bar Pei Agafen, but Asher Bachar Banu should be said at Kiddush. Without any wine, without any beer, without any food. And, okay, he doesn't have this tshuva, but he quotes the Pri Chadash, who disagrees. And he says, "Im ein lo pas o yayin lo matzil kedushe," that without bread or wine you can't make kiddush. And the proof is that the Gemara Brachos, which is really the same as our Gemara Pesachim, mevarach al yayin v'achar kach mevarach al hayom. Shayayin gorem lekedusha shetiamer, that kiddush is caused by the wine. Because of Rashi, and he quotes Rashi, Shem ein yayin ein mekadshim, without wine, no kiddush. The wine, the Gemara says, causes kiddush in the sense that if there's no wine, there's no kiddush. And wine is the same thing as bread. That's what Rashi and Rashbam said. So the Pri Chadash disagrees with this first opinion, which said that someone in the desert makes Kiddush without wine and without bread, and the Pri Chadash says no. The yayin is govrim l'kiddush haTe'amer, and this reason given in the Machlokas Beis Hillel Shammai is the source for the Psak Halacha that if someone has no wine, there is no kiddush. Yayin govrim l'kiddush. There's no kiddush without wine. Another reason given by Beis Hillel was tadir v'sheino tadir kodem, that since wine is more frequent than kiddush, the wine, the bar gafen, comes first. Rashbam gives us a source for the principle of tadir v'sheino tadir kodem. V'seches zvachim nafgalan mehai kradich sibim musafim. It says in respect to the korban musaf, milvad olas haboker asher li olas hatamid, that the musaf is brought aside from or after the korban tamid. Milvad, the word milvad, mashma, implies la'achar shehekravta hatamid takriv hamusafim. It implies that it's afterwards. V'kadashina asher la'olas hatamid kra yiserahu. And this language of Asher La'olas HaTamid, which is an extra language, a superfluous language, Asal Meilaf de Bishvil Shu Tadir Hikdima Akasuv Umikanat Adon Lakol Tadirim. This is given as an example that any time that two things are brought at the same time, the more frequent comes first. And the principle is based on the Korban Tamid, which is brought before the Korban Musaf, because the Korban Tamid is frequent, is Tadir. Tadir v'sheno Tadir, Tadir Kodem. The Gemara also dealt with the Baskol, the heavenly voice, that taught us how we paskin in the machlokas between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. And here's the Gemara in Eruvin, which describes the entire episode revolving around the Baskol. Amar Rabbi Abba Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Abba said in the name of Shmuel, Shalosh shanim nechluku Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. For 3 years, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai argued about one issue. Halalu omrim halacha kimosenu, v'halalu omrim halacha kimosenu. Beis Hillel said that the halacha follows Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai said the halacha follows Beis Shammai. They didn't know who to follow. Yatza Baskol v'Amra, the Baskol came and said, Elu v'Elu divrei Elokim chayim heim. They're both the words of the living God. You're both correct. V'halacha ki Beis Hillel, and we paskin like Beis Hillel. And the Gemara continues and describes v'chimei achar she'elu v'Elu divrei Elokim chayim. Since they're both truth, did they mazachu Beis Hillel l'kva halacha k'mosan? Why does the Beis Hillel have the merit that we paskin like Beis Hillel? Mipnei shenochim ve'aluvim hayu. They were more pleasant and kind. V'shonim divreihim v'divrei Beis Shammai. And whenever they would teach the halacha, they would teach not only their opinion, but they would also teach the opinion of Beis Shammai. V'lo od, not only that, ela shemakdimin divrei Beis Shammai l'divreihim. They would always first say what Beis Shammai said, and then say their own opinion. Ka'osa sheshaninu. For example, Misha Yerosha v'Ruba Basukah v'Shulchanam v'Zachabayis Beis Shammai poslim Beis Hillel machshirin. They first quote Beis Shammai's opinion, which says that if your table is in the house but you're sitting in the sukkah, Beis Shammai says pasul, Beis Hillel says kosher. Beis Hillel first teaches Beis Shammai that pasul, and then teaches their own opinion that kosher. Amru Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel says to Beis Shammai, Lo kacha yomaisa sheholchu ziknei Beis Shammai v'ziknei Beis Hillel l'vakar Rabbi Yochanan ben Hacharanis. They quote a story where certain Amoraim followed Beis Shammai, and then they debated about the story. The point is that Beis Hillel would first quote Beis Shammai, then give their own opinion, and they'd also respond to Beis Shammai to explain why they disagree. What you see here is something interesting, is that the Midos Tovos of Beis Hillel contributes to the fact that we paskin like him, la halacha. That the Midos integrates into the process of halacha. And It's also interesting that the quality of the person impacts on the weight we give to their teaching, and we don't have their teaching simply stand by themselves. The Gemara also relates to the story of, in the context of the Baskol, of the Tano Shalchnai, of the oven which was debated. And Rashbam in our Gemara points us to Bava Metzia, where they discuss this episode of the debate about the oven, and the fact that if you don't follow the Baskol, which told us to follow Beis Hillel, so then in other cases, lo hukva v'feivish halachik Beis Hillel svir le'sharot alatus k'div Beis Shammai osa k'div Beis Hillel osa. If it wasn't decided, you can follow whoever you want, and therefore here we had to teach specifically that Beis Hillel should be followed. What was the story? So the case is that someone cut up pieces of pottery, v'nasan chol bein chulya l'chulya, and he attached the pieces of clay with dirt. Rabbi Eliezer metaher v'chacham metamim. Rabbi Eliezer says it's tahor, that even if it comes in contact with something tamei, it's not mekabel tumah because it's not really a kli. It's like earthenware. It's like ground. The chachamim metamim. The chachamim say that since each piece was completed and it was attached, it's a kli. V'zehu tano shalchnai. This is called tano shalchnai. My achnoi. Why is it called achnoi? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel shekifu divreim ka'achnazo. All the chachamim surrounded this stove like a snake which coils around. Achna is a snake. V'timuhu, and they paskined that it's tamei like Tana. Ba'oso hayom heisher Rabbi Eliezer kol tshuva sheva olam v'lo kiblu himenu. That day Rabbi Eliezer gave all the reasons in the world why he thinks that it's not mekabel tumah. V'lo kiblu himenu, no one accepted him, no one agreed with him. But he was passionate about his opinion. Amar lahem im halacha kemosi. He said to them, if the halacha is like me, charov ze yochiach, this carob tree should prove my point. Nekar charub mimakomo, the tree was uprooted. Mea amma, 100 amos. V'amri la arba meos amma. And some say it jumped 400 amos. Amrulo ein mivin raya min charub. They said, what does a carob tree know about the halacha? That's not, we don't care about the carob tree. Chazar v'amar lahem im halacha kemosi amas hamayim yochicho. The spring of water should prove it. Chazru amas hamayim la'achareim. The water turns around the other way. Amrulo ein mivi'in raya me amas hamayim. The water doesn't know anything about halacha. Chazar v'amar lahem im halacha kemosi kosle beis hamedrash yochicho. The walls of the beis hamedrash should prove it. Hitu kosle beis hamedrash lipo. The walls started to lean over. Gar bahem Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua rejected this. Amar lahem im talmidei chachamim menatzchem zezeh b'halacha atem ativchem. You walls, the people are debating the halacha, but what's your business trying to fall down? Lo naflu b'mikvodosh Rabbi Yeshua. They didn't fall out of respect to Rabbi Yeshua. V'lo zakfu, but they didn't stand straight up in the kvodosh Rabbi Eliezer because of the kavod of Rabbi Eliezer. V'adayin matin v'obdim, and still until this day they are leaning. Chazar v'amar lahem im halacha kemosi min hashamayim yochichu. Rabbi Eliezer said the heavens should prove me right. Yatzis habaskol v'amra ma'alachem etzel Rabbi Eliezer shalacha kemosi l'chol makom. The heavenly voice said, Rabbi Eliezer knows what he's talking about, he's correct. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ragla v'amar Rabbi Yeshua got up on his feet and said, Lo b'shamayim hi. It's not in the heavens. My lo b'shamayim hi. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah shekvar nitna Torah me'ar Sinai. Ein anu mashkichim bevaskol. That we don't follow the heavenly voices. We don't care what Shemayim says. The Torah was given from heavens, brought down to the earth, and now kvar kasavta bar Sinai bar Torah achrei rabim lahatos. It says in the Torah, achrei rabim lahatos, we should follow the majority, and therefore we don't follow the Baskal. We don't follow Rabbi Eliezer. We follow the Chacham in the majority. Ashkechai Rabbi Nasan Eliyahu Amar Lei My Avid Kushabrichu B'Haishaita. Rabbi Nasan met Eliyahu Navi one day and asked, what was God saying at this time? Amar le kachayech vi amar nitzchuni banai nitzchuni banai. He was smiling and saying that my children have defeated me and overcome me in happiness.